Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the Q&A. If you hear a dog in the background barking, then many apologies. My brother's new dog is now living with us and it makes an awful lot of noise. Footage in the background today is going to include something sort of special, fan art. A lot of people have been sending me fan art in recently. I've been talking about it a bit over on the podcast and I wanted to share that off a bit, give some people some real recognition. So as the footage goes along, every now and then there'll be some spliced in there. This is not all of it by any stretch of the imagination. Someone's actually doing a comic series with me and Matt Visual in it, which is fantastic, but I don't think I have those gathered up for this video, so you have to bear with me on that. Another little thing of news before I jump into the question that I want to talk about is the swinging boys. This again was something that sort of began over on the podcast, but I think is very interesting regardless. I've had a few personal messages from people and comments about it anyway. The idea of the swinging boys in Guild Wars 2. If you guys don't know, there's always been, back at launch, a really small NPC, a human child, swinging from a mast very high up outside of Lion's Arch. You could see him and it was like this cool little Easter egg. Turned out that there was a second swinging boy also in World vs. World in a room. I've never actually been there, but apparently it's a room full of cats. So there was one in World vs. World 2, and the devs have always openly stated, hey, there's actually a third swinging boy in the game. Where is it? Who knows? Well, we talked about this on the podcast and put out a bounty basically on the head of this third swinging child of 20 gold. Whoever could find the third supposed swinging boy in Guild Wars 2, I would give them 20 gold and Matt was going to give them. So it was a 40 gold prize pool. Someone actually managed to find that during the week. The third swinging boy is in PvP. This was a theory I'd heard a fair few times. It should be footage in the background of it right now. The idea that one swinging boy was in PvE, one was in World vs. World, and the last was in PvP. And it's in the Battle of Kylo. That's where you're seeing it. It's very small in a tiny archway way up in the distance. The resolution and just clarity on it is really abysmal, to be honest. Even if I pan in on the footage, you'll probably barely be able to tell that it's the swinging boy, but he is there. The Kylo map in particular was the first ever map they designed for PvP. It's actually got a lot more love and care and attention in it. It feels like than most other maps. It's really well designed. It's got a great secondary mechanic. It's got all the destructible terrain and stuff, and in there, hidden way in the background, indeed, is one of the swinging boys. A little tip as well, if you do see something like this that has very low clarity, there is an option, a command line argument you can enable for Guild Wars 2, which means whenever you hit print screen, it actually takes a higher resolution screenshot. It saves the screenshot in a better file format, I believe, which gives you a better resolution on your screens and you can tell more about the game. It was actually an enableable feature in the betas, which they removed, much like first person mode and all different things like this, but it is still there. It's just a little bit more tricky to get to. You can find a link in the description to command line arguments down below. Anyway, so question number one, last, it comes from the Ubelisk, who says, I noticed in one of the pieces of music in your Living Story Season 2 predictions video was absolutely fantastic cover of the Comet Observatory theme in Super Mario Galaxy. However, to my chagrin, I cannot find this particular piece on YouTube. Please help. I cannot help you with this. I have had an ungodly amount of comments, positive comments, thankfully, lately, about the music I've started using in my videos. To tell you guys the truth, I haven't been looking through and thinking about all my favorite video games and all the bits of music that get me really nostalgic. For example, there's been a fair amount of Assassin's Creed music on the videos, and I haven't even played the Assassin's Creed games. No, the reason why this music now appears on my video is I was lazy, and I've been very into mixes lately. Not just in terms of YouTube or whatever, but just personally, I've been listening to a lot of mixes of different genres of music, and it's a really fun way of sort of broadening your horizons, I guess. Anyway, I found a 5-hour mix on YouTube. Again, there'll be a link in the description of atmospheric and relaxing video game music, and I've literally been using that wholesale in my videos, different portions of it each time, but that's where the music's coming from. If you want to find a specific track, as many people seem to, that's where you want to go. Alright, on to the first Guild Wars 2 question. 4 minutes in, is from IrishDog41, who says, when we get Tangu or get close and develop ties with the Tangu, do you think there are Tangu tribes hiding out in places like the Woodland Cascades in Kryta, where the Quetzal once lived, or some Tangu in the new fertile Crystal Desert where some Sinsali from Cantha that maybe got lost on their way? Just idea. Also, do you think there is a possibility of finally having a use for the Tyria upper level button on the world map, since there are theories of Tangu living in the sky? Also, did you see that the Tyria lower level button was removed? Alright, let's pick at this piece by piece. First of all, I want to clarify for people the woodland cascades. You won't know necessarily what this is if you're only a Guild Wars 2 player. If you think of Divinity's Reach, right, it's got two sort of lake-ish formations around it. North of those lakes is a very verdant and green-looking area above. Those are the woodland cascades. It was a place we could go to very briefly, only for a very minor amount of time in a small little explorable zone in the first game. And there we found a rather exotic-looking tribe of Tangu known as the Quetzal. The Quetzal happen to be my favourite type of Tangu as they are green. They're like Aztec kind of very, you know how you get like parrots in the rainforest that make themselves all these very bright and vibrant colours to attract a mate. Basically, this is what the Quetzal are. They're very, very cool Tangu. I really hope that when ArenaNet add Tangu as a race, that they are one of the available options. Not necessarily just like a colour you can pick for your feathers, but an actual full-fledged option. You know how we have Blood Legion Char, Ash Legion Char, Iron Legion Char. We should have distinct tribes for the Tangu once they become a race. You should be able to choose whether you want to be an Angchu, who are the sort of the traditional noble good guy Tangu who we met in Cantha, or a Sinsali, who historically were the more xenophobic and evil of them, or one of these really rare, weird ones, the Quetzal, and they can flesh out the lore on that. Anyway, do I think that Tangu are still hiding in the Woodland Cascades? Sure. I mean, we've not got to go back there. There's barely, if any, dialogue in the entire game that even references that area or how it might have changed in 250 years. Geographically, it doesn't look like it's changed very much. Obviously, the far Shiver Peaks just to the east of it have changed a lot, but that area in particular, I see no reason why the Quetzal couldn't still be there. As for Sinsali and so forth in the Crystal Desert, sure. What many people might forget is, all over Tyria, and in many different areas, really only Alona was the one devoid of them, were Tangu before. Like, Tangu were largely hostile to us, as in theory they should be in Guild Wars 2 also, despite the fact we can't fight very many, you know, only for skill challenges and stuff. They were all over the world, many different tribes, and they were hostile to us. They're not around so much anymore. They've all become very secluded. They're hiding in the Dominion of Winds. But in these areas we haven't got to access yet, why should they be hiding if there's been so little human, Char, Norn, and so forth influence there? They could be there, and I think that would be something nice to explore before we get Tangu as a race. You know, you start exploring into, say, the Maguma jungle with Season 2 Living World. Yeah, what if there start to be a lot of Tangu around there, and then that's some vague reason how we eventually get them to become a playable race, and they become relevant to the current story. As to the second part of your question, talking about the levels on the world map, these actually are relevant. You say in your question, oh, they're completely useless, will they add a use for them? They do have a use, it's just largely in specific areas. Honor of the Waves, for example, if you ever run that dungeon in explorable mode, being able to swap through those tabs like that is very useful in order to pick the correct waypoint that you want, or even point out, you know, certain point of interest and things. It does have use, and with many of the main cities as well, it still has use. The Grove, it has use. You can toggle through those different layers so that you can drop immediately to the bottom level or go straight up to the top level. Divinity's Reach, if you ever go to Divinity's Reach, you can use this level system every single day to go between like the Minister's waypoint and the one on the lower floor down below. Now, if you do consider it on a larger scale, like you're looking at the world map, you've zoomed fully out, then yes, it has no real use. You can toggle between them, and they even have art changes. If you were looking at the upper level of Guild Wars 2, you've got the clouds in the sky and the lower level, and I do think it's kind of an exciting idea that Guild Wars 2 eventually could expand to the size where it's got like its regular world map, and then you could say, oh hey, I want to look at the lower level of Tyria, and then you see almost like a whole new world map appears, the underworld of Guild Wars 2, the actual depths of Tyria, completely reimagined and re-implemented into the game, and you can actually wander around down there, and there are cities down there and varying landscapes. That's an exciting idea. Let's be realistic though, I don't think that's happening with this series. If not now, probably not in 5 years, then maybe not ever. And yeah, you could go even crazier and say, oh man, well yeah, Tangu flying. Tangu are flightless birds, by the way, so that wouldn't really work with the Tangu themed expansion. But you know, the idea of having cloud cities and stuff, and then having another layer of Tyria above everything, interesting. Again, maybe it would have some warrant if there was ever flying in the game, but there's no way they're going to add flying to Guild Wars 2. It's structured in such a way that it would never work mechanically. It would be a huge job for them to actually incorporate a feature like that, and let's face it, flying can remove a lot of the joy of exploration. Unless the flying feature came with some arbitrary attachment to it that forced you to not be able to fly in a new area until you'd fully explored it or something like that, it's just not going to be good for the game. I don't think it's a great feature, and I don't think it would be an easy one for them to implement. So basically what I'm saying is the world map works fine, it has some use with the toggle layers, and I doubt we'll ever get that much more. The next question was a personal message I got. It was a very long personal message, a well thought out argument that someone was given to me that I want to bring some serious attention to because I've only mentioned it in passing recently on the channel, and I do think it deserves some discussion. And this is on the idea of role-playing. The message was sent by someone called Oblivious33, and they talked to me about how basically role-playing has been destroyed by megaservers. I've done talks on megaservers, how I think that they're good for the game and how I can be a little bit frustrated by them. In fact, I have a new frustration for the list now. When I'm running COE, you can push the entire meta event to unlock the dungeon, go inside, and then that should be open for the entirety of your 3 paths. Once you've opened COE, it stays open for a long time. But then once you finish, say, path 1, you come out, what do you know? Oh, it's locked again. Why is it locked again? Because the game's just dumped you in another mega server. Why is the game dumped you in another mega server? Because the Mega Destroyer or the Golem Mark II World Boss events just so happened to have procced a couple of minutes ago, and your old mega server filled up instantly, and so you're now in a new copy where the dungeon is closed. That stuff is pretty frustrating, but it's just a minor frustration. Role-playing has basically been killed in Guild Wars 2. If you guys are unaware of how this used to work, we obviously used to have our individual servers and everyone would just play along nicely in those. There were, for North America and for EU, specific community-decided servers that were there for role-playing. I had numerous friends who found it immensely entertaining to go to, say, Divinity's Reach on a role-play server and listen to people talking to one another in map chat. I have nothing against role-players. I think it's a really creative and fun way to play the game, and if you can invent your own fun like that, you're going to get a lot more out of Guild Wars 2 than perhaps other players do. I've got a lot of respect for people who actually want to roleplay. It's never been something I've wanted to do myself, frankly. People sort of assume because I like the lore, I'm also into roleplaying. I've never done it myself, but it does look good. The fact is, with mega servers, how can they roleplay with other people who want to roleplay when everyone's just this giant melting pot? For your average roleplayer who was once, say, on Tarnished Coast and always knew that they'd have this community there, they're now bundled in with a bunch of other random PvE people, 13-year-olds that have just bought the game and have no idea what's going on, complaining about how rangers don't have rifles and stuff, and then laughed at. You know, this is something people openly mock, and I think it's wrong to openly mock, but that's what they do, right? And now for you, Mr. Regular RPer, what do you do to continue playing the game in this way? You try and find like some massive guild of entirely RPers and then fight against the overflow in the mega server system just to bring yourself together? Even if you did that, you would still have randoms out of the loop about that could step on your fun. And it's ruined the general idea of creating a level 1 and sort of playing through Guild Wars 2 while vaguely RPing at the same time. You know, there's different levels of how you RP. You could be the kind of RPer that just spends all day in Divinity's Reach and you pretend you run a shop there and you sell fish in your shop and it's amazing, right? But that's all you do. Or you could just be playing on a roleplay server, invested in the general systems of the game, wanting to go from level 1 to 80, maybe complete the personal story, but you like the idea that as you're completing Guild Wars 2's content, you can wander around, find other players, and, you know, comment on Tyrian topics with them, just in passing. If you're the latter kind of player like that, the mega server system screws you even harder. You can't even bundle together in like a big guild of people because that assumes you're all going to be in roughly the same map. What if you're generally exploring throughout Kryta? Right now you're in Queensdale. Great, you've got all your other RP friends in Queensdale. What happens when you go to Kessex? What happens when you get to Blood-Tide Coast? It's ruined. It's completely ruined, and I think it's something that devs need to address. The worrying thing about this whole thing is pre-launch, they never felt it was important enough to specify a server officially for RPing. Some games do this. They say, right, this is a French server, this is a German server, this is a Spanish server, this is a role-playing server. People do that. You know, you can actually have that set up by the devs saying, look, these are role-play servers, you can go to them, but they never cared back then. Why would they care now? Just the move to the mega servers in the first place, throwing the RPers to the wind straight away says they don't care. But now what are we asking for? Some kind of feature so that these people can play together again? The most obvious answer to this problem would be to add, say, a checkbox in everyone's general options that says, I want to roleplay, or something along these lines. When you check that box, it changes the algorithms for the mega servers, and it will group you, weight you much more heavily with just other roleplayers. But then you come into question of what about people who want to abuse this for whatever reason? People want to use this so that they can ferry their entire guild into a certain group and they can be more assured that the mega servers will work nicely for them by abusing this new RP feature rather than anything else. It's something that's going to take thought from the devs, it's something that's going to take coding, it's going to take effort, and do they value that effort as having a big enough payoff? I don't know. As having never been personally a part of the RP community, I can also say I have a pessimistic view as to the size of that community, and the smaller the size of that community, the less likely ArenaNet is to care. Anyway, I wanted to talk about, maybe you guys have got some ideas on what they can do for this whole situation, because it sounds horrible, and it sounds like there's a whole demographic of people now that just cannot play Guild Wars 2, and isn't that pretty lame? The next question is from Dennis Werngren, who says, what's the best way to get karma? I'll only touch on this lightly because I don't really do this that much. I know of 2 ways, or at least 2 ways that I would do if I was going for karma. Number 1 is the Edge of the Mist champ train. In fact, many of the old champ trains, although they are slower now and less profitable, all champions are now associated with events, which means you do get karma from them. If you went into Edge of the Mist, though, you loaded yourself up on a bunch of karma boosters, birthday booster, for example, you run around for a bit, you can get a fair amount of karma. For a while, I was at about 50,000 karma every day, and that was not difficult to get, I promise you. In Edge of the Mist, you're also getting a bunch of other stuff in addition to the karma, such as world experience and the general loot you would get from a champ train. So that would be my main suggested one for a brainless way to do it. Another thing, though, that I'm aware is quite popular is Fractals of the Mists. A while back they added karma as a reward if you are doing fractals of a lower scale than your personal reward level. And as far as I understand it, because obviously fractals are quite easy at the lower scales, if you blast your way through those, you can get a fair amount of karma very quickly. It's to the point where I think most dungeon runners and fractal players actually suggest having like an alternate extra amulet on your character, specifically with a karmic infusion on it, so that you get more karma gain. It's funny that you asked me this question, and I quite like it, because for a long time after launch, karma was this non-currency. It was a currency in the game, but you got it so quickly, especially with jugs of karma, and there was so little to spend it on, who the hell cared? And I always thought that was a massive shame. I always thought, damn, you know, karma is completely devalued. Look at this whole system in the game. Nobody really cares about us to work towards. We're really getting to a point now with this game where even those people who built up tons and millions of karma back then, most of them have spent it, and now it is becoming a thing. How do we get karma? People value karma boosters and karma food, and I think that's really positive. I'm in the same boat. I need a lot of karma for my next legendary, and I'll be doing one of those 2 methods I just mentioned. Next question is from Declan Goodsell. Again, I won't hang on it too long, but hey WP, I noticed in your video you talked about tier 1 world versus world experience. I was wondering whether the queues were actually as bad as everyone says they were. I will say, the main reason I picked this question, okay, is because I want to talk about it. I had such a huge response to that video. People really don't like Blackgate, it seems. And it seems to me I have been out of the world versus world experience of Guild Wars 2 for so long, and it's just been this monstrous thing brewing and brewing and brewing. I've got to say, most comments anyone has ever had to me since I've done that video about world versus world are negative. Not negative necessarily about what I've said, though I had some of that, but people just seem to think that world versus world is in a terrible state. People can't stand the idea of buying guilds, which I think in theory is sort of an interesting idea, and nobody's really happy with the way their matchups are working. I'm sure some very casual players are, but it seems icky, man. It seems very weird. I had no idea that so much drama and history had been building between servers. I always brushed it off when someone would say to me, oh, you know, Blackgate people hate Tarnished Coast players, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, come on, it's just a video game. Hate may not be too much of an overstatement, though. Jeez, people get really invested, and it's kind of sad in a lot of ways, too. Anyway, you're asking specifically about the queues in World vs. World. For me, I haven't found the queues to be that bad. I was surprised that being like just 28th in line in a queue still took me around an hour to get in on reset, but you know, maybe that shouldn't be so surprising. People get in on reset, they want to stay there. They play for an hour or so and then they get off. So specifically at reset, queues take a long time to go through, though the numbers aren't as high as I expected. This could, however, be because of what I just said. Nobody seems to be very happy with the way World vs. World is right now, and particularly I think numbers are a lot lower right now than they were at the start of this season or even the start of Season 1 World vs. World. So I don't have a complete understanding yet. This is something I'm going to have to build up over many weeks and many days. Some people were saying, oh hey, I'm disappointed in the build you were running, WP, and stuff. Like, yeah, I'm new to World vs. World. I'm sort of testing stuff out, and it will come when it comes. I find it fascinating though, and I guess I'm still having fun personally. I'll become an embittered player soon enough. Don't worry guys, I'll have some rant videos when that time comes. The last question is from The Real Halo, who says, did you end up purchasing your legend off the trading post? I absolutely loathe RNG. I have never had a precursor drop in my entire time playing Guild Wars 2. Every precursor I've ever had and probably ever will have, I bought straight off the TP. You also say, how do you feel about the new meta event schedule? I almost feel like the long breaks that end up happening don't make them worth it anymore unless you have absolutely nothing else to be doing. Yeah, you know, you're right. I've really begun to feel this. For a very short time after the mega servers came in, I was really buzzing on those world events. I was like, hell yeah, you know, this is such a casual, stupid little thing I can do, but look at all the players. This is so fun. Everyone's congregated together, and I was experiencing mega events I hadn't done for a long while, or certainly never done with such a huge Zerg. It was a cool novelty. However, I don't do them anymore. You're totally right. For people out of the loop, world bosses used to trigger all over the place, and you could get third-party apps that would help you figure out which one spawned where. Obviously, you could have connections in your guild, and people would call out when stuff's up, and you could rush through. This meant that, yes, they were difficult to find, but once you had the systems in place to find them, you could go bang, world boss, bang, 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 do a bunch of them in a row, you know, race and get some really clutch tags on world bosses even, and have a lot of money before finally there's a bit of a break. Now world bosses are, I guess the general community seems to really enjoy them because there are still tons of people still doing them, but they're slow and they're kind of boring. You know, you get a new world boss spawns every 15 minutes, right? And some of these world bosses you kill in a matter of minutes. So you've killed the world boss and then you're waiting 10 minutes for the next one to come up. That might not sound like that much, but then you kill the next one. What are you doing now? Waiting 10 minutes again. What are you doing now? Waiting 10 minutes again. It gets worse when, because of the way the world bosses cycle, those low-level world bosses, the more common ones, come up much more frequently. So you'll maybe do world bosses for an hour and a half to 2 hours, and all of a sudden you've seen that the same world boss that you killed at the start has popped again. So now you're not waiting 10 minutes, you wait like half an hour for or over half an hour for your next boss you actually want to spawn. And then the problem gets even further compounded by the fact there's like gaps in the schedule right now with the TBD world boss. I do think it's too slow, and it also says something interesting about ArenaNet's future plans for world boss. They've given one specific slot for a new boss to come in the game. Well, what after that? Are they happy with world bosses? They're leaving them forever? There's still a hell of a lot of maps, I can tell you that nobody goes to for world bosses. There are suitable meta events out there in Guild Wars 2 right now that people don't do that could easily have a daily chest associated with, and just a couple of minor tweaks and buffs to the boss so that people would do them daily. Think about Fireheart Rise. I think it'd be pretty cool. In the southwest corner of Fireheart Rise is that big, interesting meta event to do with a Grawl. Why can't we just have a boss spawn at the end of that? You know, have some fun, implement a new boss, and then put that onto the daily rotation. I'd be sad if ArenaNet aren't going to update this any further. Just one new boss and leave it. I want to see them just crack down just a little bit and add a bunch more, and then maybe have 2 pop every 15 minutes. Currently it's 1 every 15 minutes. Give players choice, right? You can say, all right, you can go for this one or this one, and that adds a little bit of play into it as well. Right, well, maybe I'll go for Fire Elemental because that one dies really quickly, and then I'll go to Golem Mark II just after that because I could probably get both tags in 15 minutes, and that adds a little bit more of the gameplay we originally saw with the system, while, you know, keeping it structured and rigid. Anyway, that's the way I'd like to see world bosses done. As for now, though, I don't really do them. Maybe if I've got a couple of minutes and I know it's spawned and it's nearby, sure. But it's boring. You're right, it is boring. Anyway, there you go, guys. That's the Q&A for today. Thank you very much for watching. If you've got any questions, feel free to leave them down below. Some of the questions for today were sourced from my PM, my inbox on YouTube, which I've been incredibly negligent about recently. So I am slowly going through those, but I'd love to see any extra questions you guys have. Let me know what you think, and I will see you next time.